Hi, this is Jason Constantino with In Control Industrial Automation. Here I'm going to be going over the chemical dosing station and the HMI screens. On the computer here I have a simulation running. The top screen, this is the main screen that appears when the machine is powered on. At the top we have the header bar where it displays the screen name, the page number. This is for troubleshooting purposes to know which page you're on. Over here, the mode that the machine's in and date and time. This bar is on all the pages. At the bottom of the HMI we have different screen tabs to change through. On this main screen we can always use the stop button in any mode, the start button which will start the chemical dosing station in local run, and then the blue button here is to change the dosing station into a remote run operation. So we can hit stop, start to see local run, hit stop again, see the mode of the machine changing, and then if we hit the blue button it goes into remote operation. So the pumps will start regardless of if the silver traverse is running or not, but it'll run from the last known state or condition of when the recipe was selected on the silver traverse. So going to the bottom, that's the main screen. The next screen here is the traverse communication. So this section here is saying traverse communication to the dosing station. So in this simulation I'm showing that the traverse is running in automatic mode. The 100-inch glass is selected and we have a heartbeat signal. And then from the dosing station we're sending signals of a heartbeat and whether or not we're in remote run. If I go back to the main screen, I select that we're in remote run. Go back to this traverse page. We can see here that we're in remote run, telling the traverse that we're in automatic running and that we have established communication, that we can see a heartbeat that we're sending out and receiving. This next page here, I/O configuration. Once this gets set up, shouldn't have to change, but we have 4 channels of analog input, and these are the conductivity sensors. So channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. These go along with each of the pumps and the conductivity sensor. So if looking at the machine facing the dosing pumps with the screen, these go right in order of the pumps. These cannot be configured unless we're logged in. So down here, this button here will pull up a password, which is 8880. And that changes the login level from operator to technician. So again, we're on the analog input screen and we can change our variable to how many decimal places we want to read. And then because it's an analog signal sending a 4 to 20 milliamp range, we want to scale that into actual engineering units or what the conductivity sensor is reading. So here we have at 4 milliamps it's reading 0, and the maximum value at 20 milliamps, for example, channel 1 is 200, channel 2 100. And if we need to shift that engineering unit value, we can plus or minus the amount here. Before any of these get changed, we have to disable the analog inputs and outputs. so then these values can be accepted before it's re-enabled. When the values are typed in, we don't need to put in the decimal place, we just need to know how many digits are need to be displayed. So for example, if it's one decimal value being shown and we want the value of 1, we type in 10. Once that's accepted, then we can re-enable the analog inputs and outputs. This button here, this changes over to the analog output. So same thing as the input, we do the scaling. This is for the dosing pumps for the analog output signal. 4 to 20 milliamps, and the pumps, they can do a flow rate maximum of 7,500 milliliters. The next screen here is the alarm history. So anytime there is an alarm, whether there's a conductivity sensor that's outside of acceptable range, it'll show up here as either low or high, or if we're missing communication between the silver traverse, we'll get alarm events that show up. As they show up, they'll come up in red, and then they'll have the comment explaining what the alarm is, and then a date here to the side where it'll say when the alarm was acknowledged, and that's this button here, acknowledge reset. These buttons here, we can cycle through the alarm history, scroll through and look at each alarm and when the events happened. And the HMI is capable of saving up to 1,000 alarms, and then I'll start rewriting over that alarm history. I'm going to skip this machine config tab after I explain the recipe setup. So on the recipe setup screen, we have the 4 pumping stations, and then these 4 recipes, and then this 5th one for custom local running mode. So again, if we go back to the main screen, I'll hit stop. If I hit start, this will be a local run mode, and the machine, the pumping dosing machine, will start running at what these set values are for just this custom local recipe. If I go to this traverse communication screen, if the 100 inch is selected and we have established communication, and I go to the main screen, hit stop, and then hit the blue button for remote run, the dosing station will start running at this 100 inch recipe. So for each of these columns, for each of the pumps, we can see what the standard starting rate is set to. So this is the flow for that pump, 5,000 milliliters, and 64 for what we want to try to maintain conductivity range at. And that's for each of these pumps. So being in the technician level, we can change these values and accept them. So that's the recipe setup. So now we can go to the machine configuration. So while the machine's running and we have the recipe selected, we have each of the pumps, and we're going to try to maintain that conductivity by varying the flow of the chemical dosing at each pump. So here we have conductivity deadband from what the recipe set point is. So if we're running the 100 inch glass on pump 1, you want to maintain 64 for the conductivity. We're allowing a value of plus and minus 5 around that 64 value. down here, this response check. So every 10 seconds, we're going to read what the actual value is of the conductivity sensor and compare it to what our set point is, plus and minus 5. And if it's outside of that range, we're going to change the speed of the pump 20 milliliters for the flow rate to try to adjust for that. And then every 10 seconds it's going to read the conductivity value, and if it's within the range it won't change, but if it's outside the range it'll change the pump speed accordingly. And then we have down here max allowed scaled pump output and minimum scaled output value. This is the min and max that we're allowing the pump to adjust to maintain that set point value of conductivity. If the pump keeps increasing or decreasing and gets to these min or max values, and then it holds there for another 10 seconds and it still can't reach its conductivity range, we'll have an alarm displayed saying whether or not it's high or low. That's for each of these pumps. Down here on the bottom we have 4 different modes of configuration. The first one is another push button for the disable analog input output. So that's the same here as the disable analog input output on the I/O configuration screen. It's just a copy of it. It's placed here just for simplicity for changing here, but it can also be disabled on the configuration screen. We have this button here, disable all pumps. So this will stop the pumps of whatever the machine's running at. This could be used for maintenance. This next button here, disable remote communication with traverse. So if we wanted to cut the communication off with the silver traverse, we can do that. And then this last button here is disable conductivity feedback and just run the pumps at what the set point starting value of what recipe is selected to run. So while this is on, if we have the disable conductivity feedback and we hit start on the machine, it'll just run at this flow rate for whichever recipe is selected and stay at that value. This page here, machine monitor, this gives us the values that are running currently. So we have our analog input and output. So we have channel 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the conductivity input to the PLC, and analog output 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the pumps. So we can see what the actual milliamp value is, what the scaled value down here, same thing for the output, the operation value, or what the current pump value is controlled to. And then we have the set value, which is the conductivity recipe that's we're trying to maintain. So if we go to this machine monitor page and we see the machine running, we can see what the actual input value is compared to what the recipe value is selected. Also on the screen we have 4 more buttons down here. We have dosing history. So as the pumps are running for the day, we have in seconds how long the pumps have been running. So if I hit stop and go back to this machine monitor screen, dosing history, we can see that the seconds aren't increasing anymore. At the end of the day, or specifically at midnight, if the machine is powered on, this value will move down to the next day, and this will get cleared out for the following day to be able to run and have a recording history of the last 8 days. If the PLC is turned off at midnight, the next power cycle of the PLC will display and take this value and move it down. So this isn't -1 from the date, this is -1 from the last time the machine was powered on. We can go back. Go to PLC monitor. This here is showing the PLC and the 2 analog cards on the PLC unit. A1 relates to this card here. That's the analog input. So there's indicators letting us know whether you're at the scaled upper limit of what it's being detected. If the wire's disconnected, it'll show indicators here on these lamps of any issues. That's for the input. For the output, A2, that's analog output, same thing, disconnection detection. So if there's a wire that's disconnected, if there's a conversion that's been disabled, any alarms, this here is kind of standard and built into these module cards, and it can be indicated here. If the PLC has a fault internally to the CPU processor of the PLC, there'll be an alarm code here. And at any time there's an alarm on any of these units, we can reset specifically each one of these. If these are detected, they'll also be in the alarm list, but it needs to be reset, so the alarm will actually indicate to an operator, go to this screen and reset, and then you'll be able to acknowledge the alarm. Any of the alarms that happen does not stop the operation of the pumps. It's just more of a warning and an indication to the operators. This button here, plumbing and instrument, this is just a plumbing and instrumentation diagram. I added this because this was available. And then within here there's device monitor, and this is more for PLC troubleshooting. So these are just addresses of the PLC. We can see that if they're turned on or off. And then again here, the security logout. So this here, that just disables from technician level to operator. So again, if I wanted to log in with operator, 8880, enter, and it changes to that. Back to the machine configuration screen, there is another button here that says adjust clock. This here, you can adjust the time, set the time, and also it shows the last time the PLC was powered on. That's a general overview of the chemical dosing station.